Hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Belmont Buzz, Belmont's newest talk show. I'm your host, multimedia journalist Joanna Tzouvelis for the Belmont Citizen Herald and Wicked Local Belmont. I hope you enjoyed the opening of our show as much as I enjoyed making it. To be honest with you, I really do feel like a bee sometimes with my job, buzzing around Belmont, looking for news. Today's latest buzz that we're going to talk about is town meeting, which is coming up, a special town meeting which starts November 13th and most likely will continue to November 14th. Here to talk with us about that is our town moderator, Mike Widmer. Mike has lived in Belmont for 43 years. He raised his 3 children in Belmont. He's served as town meeting member since 1981. He served on the warrant committee for 15 years prior to becoming town moderator, and he's been our town moderator for 10 years. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to be here.
I have a little leftover Halloween candy I thought I'd share with you, and also, this is going to be a very scary thing that we're going to be talking about.
Yes,
what do
town
you think?
meeting is very scary.
This one might be. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of this town meeting, I thought I'd ask you, why did you want to become town moderator, and what do you like about being town moderator?
Well, I've been active in Belmont government and politics since shortly after my wife and I moved here. And I'd been on the warrant committee for, as you mentioned, for 15 years. It was time to step down, but I wanted to stay involved. And I'd always thought in the back of my mind that I'd like to be town moderator. I have great respect for town meeting. It can sometimes be a bit unruly, but it's our legislative body. So I'd given it some thought, and when I thought it was ready to step down from the warrant committee, I ran for moderator and did not have any opposition.
No opposition. And every year you've had no opposition, right?
Every year, yes. Some towns you have a 3-year term, but Belmont it's 1 year.
1 year, so every year you have to run again.
Right, and but I've enjoyed it a lot, and as I've said, I have great respect for town meeting as the town's legislative body, and of course the tradition goes way back to the beginning of New England democracy here, and so I enjoy it, and I appreciate the work that everybody does to make it an important body for Belmont.
You have a 10-year perspective. I mean, would you say over the past decade things have changed? Do you feel like year to year things change? And where we are now, I mean, what do you think of where we are now compared to where we were 10 years ago?
Well, there always are surprises from year to year, but I think as a general matter, we have broader participation among town meeting members. Used to be more limited to a smaller group. I think it's broader now. And people, and I've tried to encourage this, people seem to be sticking more directly and focused to the item we're discussing, and to keep their comments within 5 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes.
Right, that's important.
It is important because you can say pretty much what you want, I think, in most cases, unless it's a major presentation, in 5 minutes. So I think we've seen, as I say, greater participation, but more focused.
Yeah. Now, what have you done to prepare for this town meeting?
Well, we go through, and I say we, the town clerk, town administrator, department heads, town council, we go through a planning process because it's very important that we're organized and the presentations are focused, so forth. So we've had one major meeting in which all of about 10 or 12 of us are there, school superintendent, chair of the school committee and warrant committee, board of selectmen chair, and so forth, town clerk and town council, town administrator, and we go through each of the articles and the motions.
Okay.
And we see, all right, what questions are there about them? Are they written appropriately? What's the right sequence of the articles?
Yes.
Who's going to be in touch with the proponents and of a citizen's petition, for example, and how long a presentation for Article X.
Okay.
A lot of nitty-gritty details.
That's for sure.
So that we don't end up having a little mini chaos on town meeting floor.
Well, speaking of chaos, what do you think will be the most contentious, most heavily debated article for this special town meeting?
Well, I think there are two, but I think the most likely is the marijuana, based on the discussions we had at town meeting in the spring.
Okay.
A very emotional issue.
Yes, so back in the spring, the discussion was whether or not Belmont would opt out completely from even allowing retail marijuana. That article was amended and changed to allow up to 2 retail stores, right?
And then-
that passed.
And then we had a vote,
And then we had the vote
the
September
vote of
25th.
the townsfolk, and they clearly approved. There were 2 options. One is
Yes.
limit to 2 retail establishments, or have no limits on anything.
So now we're having the 2. And
We
now
have
the
the
question
2.
was where? And this
Yes.
vote that they're going to do, you think it'll happen November 13th?
I think it'll be the second night.
Second night?
The second
So
night.
that vote, November 14th, is going to determine whether or not 2 retail marijuana establishments will be allowed to open on South Pleasant Street between Snake Hill and Trapello Road.
Right.
That's the question.
That's the question.
That town meeting has to either approve or disapprove.
And so it's really limited to the zoning issue.
Yes.
We've already spoken, we, the town people, have spoken in favor of limiting it to 2, and so that's done. So now are we going to approve the zoning and have the
Okay.
2 retail establishments in that district or not? Now, if we don't approve it, town meeting, then there will be no limits. It could
Right.
be in any part of
Go
town.
anywhere, and there wouldn't be a special permit process. So why do you think this is going to be contentious and heavily debated? What do you think it is about it?
In truth, it surprises me a little. I was surprised in the spring at how emotional it was, because we're talking about whether we, Belmont, have establishments or not, but of course we're going to have them in Cambridge and Watertown and Arlington, and so it's going to be all around us
Right.
anyway. But clearly there were very strong feelings, and so I presume those strong feelings then will continue to this special town meeting, though I don't think it's going to be as controversial, because there aren't very many places in Belmont that I think people would support having marijuana establishments.
Right.
And so there are not a lot of options, so it's not as if there's going to be strong support for putting it in some residential area. to be-
Yes, I think that there are, however, a lot of town meeting members who wanted it also zoned for the area where the loading dock is, the
Yes.
Brighton Street area. So I think that that could also be why there'll be a lot of maybe opposition. There might even be, between now that you and I are talking and town meeting, there might even be amendments filed.
There
although
may be
we're not-
amendments filed, but the item before town meeting is not the area over by the loading dock, so that's beyond the scope of the
Now,
article.
so if people bring that up, you're going to have to be like,
Yes.
stay on topic.
Say
and-
exactly. One of my jobs is to try to keep the discussion within the scope of the article.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if somebody says, hey, I think it should be 2, so we should vote down this 1,
Mm-hmm.
come back in the spring, I would allow something like that, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't allow a full discussion of the business area over by the high school and the loading dock.
Well, I was at Belmont Farmers Market recently.
Yes.
And I actually asked some random Belmont residents what they thought about the South Pleasant Street zoning for retail marijuana.
Yeah.
And we're going to roll shortly
good.
to show you what these people had to say. Roll it, Jeff.
Well, while I have you, can I also ask you about zoning for marijuana and what you think about South Pleasant Street as the zone for 2 retail stores?
You know, I think that the zoning board did their best to hide it away where no one will ever see it. And, you know, maybe that's okay. If you want to buy recreational marijuana, going to Pleasant Street isn't such a big deal. You can't have it too far away in Belmont. I mean, Belmont's not that big. You know, weed's legal. You know, it's people are going to get it wherever, whether we have the stores here or not. South Pleasant Street, I don't have any problem with that.
What about if it was in the area of the loading dock near the high school?
Well, I don't think that would be a problem, you know, down there either. Once again, you know, you're talking about, right now we have stores where you can buy liquor. We have stores where you can buy cigarettes. All of those are restricted in age about who can buy. We somehow survived that. A marijuana dispensary would follow the same rules. I don't think it's any different than any of the other things that we have, things that are for adults, and we manage to deal with that.
I think I'm happy that it will be a little further away from the schools. I'm not sure the kids would have had much access to it anyway, but I think further away just makes it that much less likely.
I think that Belmont needs to be more friendly to local businesses. And I think that when we say no to every different type of local business that might be slightly different from what we've had in the past, we give up a lot of opportunity for commercial tax base, and we end up with a very high burden of residential property taxes, because then these types of stores open just over the line where we don't have any control and we don't get any benefit, but the same product is still going to be there. So I would say my personal views as a town meeting member, that's my general feeling.
The superintendent did say that he thought that the loading dock area was too close to the high school, and he did not approve of that location. So where do you stand on that?
So again, this would be me personally. The school committee has not taken this up for discussion or taken a vote on this. I'm not sure because of the timing of how the planning board already decided that the South Pleasant Street was the only location. So I don't think in that case there's really a reason for the school committee to take a vote on it. So again, I would just defer back to my other comments that I think in general Belmont has fallen in the past too far on the side of say no first without giving opportunities to lots of different kinds of businesses. I do think with the marijuana businesses in particular, there's very, very strict rules about how those businesses need to operate. And if we look at a business like Damnation Alley Distillery in that same loading dock approximate location, I think that that is a total value add to Belmont. And having that store that sells alcohol right near the high school has not been any kind of an issue.
Okay, well, Mike, as you can see, people have differing views on this, and it will be interesting to see what happens at town meeting. But like you said, you have to keep everybody on track. We're just talking about this particular article, and it's just a question of whether or not someone will attempt to amend it before. And if they do, it's going to get even more interesting.
Well, yeah, and do they amend it in a way that's within the scope of the original article, which I'll have to determine. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, one of the things I've tried to do in all areas over this 10 years is to have the discussions be focused and not totally open-ended, because issues are controversial enough without bringing in side issues that are only barely relevant.
Well, now it's just a question of, will it get defeated? Will it pass? If it gets defeated, there may have to be another special town meeting. Otherwise, marijuana will be allowed, 2 marijuana stores will be allowed to open anywhere that there's a business zone and with no special permit process. And I would think that town meeting wouldn't do that to Belmont.
I think they'd be concerned about that. On the other hand, there is a citizen's petition
There is.
for another 6-month moratorium.
Yes.
So if town meeting voted down this Article 4 on the retail establishments, then they might want to vote for the moratorium.
Okay, that would allow zoning to be studied for another 6 months, because currently the moratorium's till December 31st.
Correct.
And if they extend it to June 30th,
Yes.
then there's 6 more months where no one would be allowed to open a retail marijuana
Right.
store in the meantime,
And
or
this-
even apply for that matter, right?
Correct. And then the planning board would go back to the drawing board presumably and come back with some proposal for the annual town meeting
Well, this
in the
is going to
spring.
be a nail biter.
So,
This
well,
is going to
we'll
be a
see.
nail biter. Now, the other nail biter, which, I'd love to hear what you have to say about, is this debt exclusion. November 6th is the day that the town will decide whether or not to approve a debt exclusion for a new grade 7 to 12 high school, $295 million. And then if it does get approved, November 6th, it will go to special town meeting, and special town meeting then has to approve it.
Correct.
And you seem to think that this also will be heavily debated and
I
discussed.
think there'll be some considerable debate. If it's defeated, then the article's dismissed,
Right.
because without the town having voted for it, there's no reason for a discussion at town meeting. It can't proceed. If the voters approve it, then town meeting needs to approve it by a 2/3 vote. Historically, town meeting has gone along with the vote of the people. So, for example, I think the most recent one was the swimming pool.
Okay.
And that was approved by the voters, and then town meeting
Okay.
followed up and approved it. This, however, of course, is a much larger expenditure.
That's for sure.
In the end, I think town meeting would likely, or quite likely, go the way of the voters if the voters approve it. But they're going to want to understand the finances,
Okay.
which is appropriate. So I think there'll be a major report from the Bill Lavallo and the Belmont
Yes.
High School Building Committee, and then I expect some discussion following up. In the end, I would think town meeting would likely follow the will of the voters.
Oh, we'll just have to see about that too. And also the South Pleasant Street overlay district, to make South Pleasant Street also have a local business 1 district over it. Like right now it's local business 2, which is not allowing things like assisted living facilities and
Well, that's one of the main purposes of having this is some options for
Right.
seniors to stay in Belmont but move out of their homes. And it doesn't have to be from Belmont, but
so this overlay district will allow an assisted living facility to be built.
yes, and
things
then
like that.
mixed uses, commercial and office.
But it
and
won't
so forth.
allow adult entertainment.
Correct.
And there's one other thing.
There is one other. I'm forgetting what it is.
I know.
But so I think that will get a reasonable amount of debate as well, because it's a significant change. I mean, anytime there's significant changes, town meeting tends to debate them and inquire and understand what they're voting on, which is what they should do.
I
but-
find
but
it
they're likely
interesting,
to.
though. 2 articles related to the same street in Belmont.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Which one will go first?
Article 3, the business district will go
Okay.
first, and
Okay.
then the marijuana
Right, that makes
retail
sense.
establishments will come immediately after, on the second night of town meeting.
Okay. And we also have an article to approve community preservation funding, $400,000, for the design of the Alexander Underpass, which,
Yes.
from what I understand, is a long time coming. 40 years the town has
Yeah.
been talking about this underpass. And it's basically a pedestrian tunnel that will be built under the MBTA railroad tracks,
Yes.
which currently many students cross over to get to school.
get to
It's
high
just
school,
a quicker
yes,
way to
yes.
get to school.
Right.
And it's dangerous.
It is, and Belmont's been talking about this, as you say, for 40 years.
Yes.
We have a pattern in Belmont. We study things for a long time, or debate them. Not everything, but a
Right.
lot. And so this is another example. And so these would be the design funds.
Just the design, and
Right.
it's part of the community path, which was approved by the selectmen. It's a community path design, an overall community path design. This is just one part
This
of
is
it.
a very, yes, the 1A, as they say, not 1B.
Right.
1B being the full path. That presumably will come before town meeting in the spring. So
Mm-hmm.
this is, and this, my understanding is, could stand alone. In other words,
Okay,
just
right.
having the underpass without a
Yes.
community path.
Which
And
a lot of
that's-
people say will really benefit the high school. Whether or not a new high school gets built or not, it's going to
Whether or not.
benefit and hopefully reduce traffic, because more kids will just be able to walk to school and there'll be less cars on the road.
And the idea is whether the new high school is built or not, that this would proceed.
Yes.
Subject to approval of town meeting.
And State Senator William Brownsberger has played a big role in making this happen, as well as State Rep David Rogers.
Yes.
Because from what I understand, we're just responsible for paying for the design, but the state has committed to pay for the actual construction.
And that's very important. And so Senator Brownsberger, Representative Rogers deserve credit for pushing this issue. And getting these kinds of funds, I know, is not easy. So that's very important that they've accomplished that.
Do you think there'll be a lot of discussion on that article? Or
I
debate?
wouldn't be surprised. And I presume the neighbors will want to know more about it, which is appropriate. I mean, if it's built in your neighborhood,
that's
you're going to
true.
want to understand the impact. And so I expect the town meeting members from Precinct 8 in particular will ask questions. I don't know if there will be opposition to this in the end or not, but I think there'll be definitely questions and exploration.
This is also an off-cycle request for community preservation
Yes.
funding. Normally, it's done in the spring.
At the town meeting, but I guess from a timing point of view, they want to get started with this.
So if they do approve this, that will mean less funds for other projects in town, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're limited funds,
Right,
so
there's only
yeah,
so
we
many
have
funds they
to
have.
pick and choose, and
yeah.
it's not easy.
It's amazing, though, all the projects that have been done with the community preservation funds that have
Yes.
really benefited the town. It's nice to see that. The other article is this tax deferral, which is basically if a senior citizen qualifies, they can defer paying their property taxes, right?
Yes.
And then currently they pay 8% interest for that property tax. And then when their
yes.
house is sold, it's either their responsibility or their heirs' responsibility to pay back that interest.
Exactly.
So-
The taxes and the interest.
So this article would actually reduce that interest from 8% to 4.5%.
Yeah, because clearly the interest rates, I mean, the 8% presumably was put in place when interest rates were much closer
Yes.
to 8%. Now we know interest rates are very, 2%, 3%.
Right.
They're in that range, so this is a little bit higher, but clearly trying to help seniors
Stay in Belmont,
stay
right?
in Belmont and then have a reasonable interest rate, something close to the current rate. And then they can stay, and in the end, their house is probably worth a lot more today than when they moved in.
Well, our property taxes
So-
keep going up. Well, property values keep going
Well, the
up.
property values.
Taxes keep going up
they go up
too.
too, but not as fast as the values. So this is a program in which I think it makes a lot of sense. And the change in interest rate is trying to encourage more people to use it and stay in Belmont.
So how do you think that one will go over at town
I think
meeting?
that would likely to be very positive. I mean, people will react positively to that.
Okay, well,
And
that's
especially
good.
if the high school debt exclusion passes,
Oh,
that will
yes.
clearly put an additional burden on some, well, on lots of people, but certainly some seniors. And this
Right.
is a program that then could help them stay in Belmont. So I think, and it's common sense,
I think so,
that
too.
we offer this kind of program. So I think people will respond positively to that.
Well, I think we covered the major articles. I want to just ask you, what do you think will be most challenging with this town meeting for you as town moderator in your role?
Well, what's often the most challenging is when people get emotional around an issue or not, and sometimes, almost always, there's some surprise at town meeting or somebody I hadn't expected. So I'm always saying to myself, expect the unexpected.
Expect the unexpected.
And usually that is good advice to myself. But as we've discussed, the emotion surrounding the marijuana question, judging by what happened in the annual town meeting last spring, is where I think there's going to be the most emotion.
Well, you actually were a town meeting member when the town went from dry to allowing
I was.
alcohol. So what do you remember about that?
It was very emotional.
It was very emotional.
And yeah, and it's always interesting we have sometimes these complicated issues and they don't get too much debate and people may not understand them, and then you get something that is real life to people and they care about, and the notion of should Belmont stay a dry town or should we very carefully introduce alcohol sales and restaurants? And in the end, that prevailed, but it was an emotional discussion, and people arguing on one side, we should just adapt to the real world, the modern world. On the other side, no, Belmont's been dry since 1859, and why should we change that now?
1859,
Since
wow.
the beginning. So it was one needs to keep a sense of humor, as well as recognize it's a serious discussion when these things happen.
In your opinion, do you feel that there's a lot of change that's happening rapidly in Belmont all of a sudden?
Yes.
Do you feel that? You do
Yes,
feel that?
I
I mean,
do
you
feel
have a
that.
43-year perspective as a resident of the town, so.
I think
I only have a 9-year perspective.
Yeah, I do feel, I mean, the development pressures is one thing. Clearly, not only in Belmont, but it sure is here because we're schools and location. We're in a very desirable place. So all the issues around that. The enrollment surge is putting enormous pressure on our school, and that's where the high school, the 7 to 12 project comes in, because we're dealing with the enrollment squeeze in all our schools, including the elementary. So there are, and then there's change. I mean, lots of new people moving in, and people buying.
And the traffic.
And the traffic. So in these recent years, Belmont has felt, in my time, almost half a century, that this is more pressures and more issues than at any single time that I've lived here.
Now, your kids are no longer in the schools, right? They're all grown
Long
up
since,
now.
yeah.
So why do you stay in Belmont?
Oh, I love Belmont. I love this community. I love the combination of, it's got some vitality, but it's also sedate. Some would say boring. But I really enjoy it, and I feel I love the community, and so I intend to stay here as long as I can.
Oh, I'm glad, and I do hope that, with the taxes going up, if the debt exclusion passes, that it doesn't drive people away, that the town can continue to do what they're doing to keep people in the town. We are running out of time, so I'm going to thank you for coming on the show, Mike. I really look forward to seeing you November
We'll see you
13th at
November 13th.
special
Thank you,
town
Joanna.
meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Belmont Buzz. The latest buzz in Belmont is definitely marijuana, and we'll see what we have to talk about next time. If you have a buzz that you'd like to bring up, email me, belmont@wickedlocal.com. I want to thank Belmont Media Center for making this show possible, especially producer and director Jeremy Meserve. And I also want to thank Paradise Flowers for these lovely flowers that she donated complimentary. Thank you.